They're bidding sometimes 800,000 over the list price.
Oh my gosh. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Reni. If you're new here, welcome, and if you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. I really appreciate each and every one of you taking your time out of your busy day to watch this video. So on my channel, I do fashion, finance, lifestyle, and career. And today I have a special guest. We have Tunde on the channel, and we will be discussing the process of buying your first house and some market trends that you should watch out for right now. If you have questions, leave them down below. And yeah, let's get started on this video. We will start right now. So first, I will have you introduce yourself and tell us about what you do.
Again, Reni, thanks for having me here. My name is Tunde, and last name is Abiodun, Abiodun. I'm an agent, a broker with Home Life Power Realty out of Kitchener. My website is tundesellskw.com. There are many facets to my business. There's a residential aspect, sales and purchases. There's a rental part of it, and then there's a multi-family. That's the commercial end of my business, and I run that with 3 partners. We're called the 4M Commercial Group.
Perfect. So I used Tunde to purchase my first property, and if you want to watch that video, you can watch it above and I will link it there. We already recorded part 1, and part 1 was about how you can become a realtor and also how the process is of working with a realtor. But now we're going into purchasing a house. And just to preface, this is a Canada focused, Ontario focused video. So if you're not in Ontario, may not be applicable for you, but you can keep watching if you want. So all of these questions were submitted by you when you submitted via Instagram. And if you have not followed me on Instagram, make sure that you do. I will link it right here and you'll be able to see how you can follow me and get your input on every single video that I have. The first question that I have is, does it make more sense for me to buy a pre-construction or not if it's a rental property or an investment property?
It really doesn't matter. The question now is, what is it you're trying to do? I've found that especially in the COVID era, a lot of pre-construction properties, the closings have been delayed. Some of them as far back as have been pushed back 3 years.
Oh wow.
And once you sign that contract, you're really at the mercy of the builder. The builder can bring it forward, he can push it backwards. Now the big question is, what's happening in the market? As we can see, multiple bids, value of properties going crazy all over the place. So the question now is, do I want to buy something and park my money there, or buy something that I can turn around and start making money out of? So it really depends on the individual. If you're willing to wait the long haul, fine. If you are not, maybe it's probably best to find something that already exists. So.
And I also realized we probably should explain what a pre-construction is. And when you do explain it, can you also explain what the pros and cons are of buying a pre-construction?
Well, a pre-construction property is something that you're buying off builder's plans. So the property doesn't exist yet. Chances are you'll maybe attend a sales site and you'll be in a model, basically what the property is the end product is gonna look like. But basically you're buying off plans. Again, you have no control over how long it's gonna take to close. The disadvantage I find with pre-construction is you don't know what the neighborhood is gonna look like. So
good point.
You buy this property and you hope everything looks homogeneous around you. Now, what if that large space next to the property is a space that somebody is going to use to build a plaza or something, or build some kind of high-rise building that's going to overlook your property? What's it going to do to the value of your property? So I find whenever one is buying, be it investment, be it personal, I'm very leery about buying new property off plans without knowing the total picture. I've dealt with clients who are looking to buy a high-end home, and all they're looking at is that high-end home standing by itself.
Not everything.
They're not really noticing that tract of land next to them What if somebody comes in there and puts in a high-rise building or low-cost townhouses? What does it do to the value of your property? So for me, those are the things that I look at. And again, as I alluded to earlier, these are the benefits of using a realtor. My job is to look at what's going on around me, find out information that you, the client, does not know about. I have access to what the city plans are, what they're planning to do, what's the development plan, what are they looking to do in the town. Things like this, you can only get this information when you work with a realtor. And a lot of this information that a realtor will give you is not written somewhere. It could just be relationships that I have with people that work in the city that I can tap into and capture this data for you.
And if you want to know more about the process of working with a realtor, make sure you check out part 1, and I will link that above. Another question that was submitted was, should I buy a more expensive home with a cosigner, such as my parent, or a lower priced home for my first home?
Again, that's one of those questions that I usually start the answer with, it depends. Your parents might not have a problem with it. It depends on the length of time. Are your parents maybe looking to, when they retire, live with you? It might make sense at that point. Are you just buying it to satisfy yourself? What's the impact of your decision on your parents? Because you might be hell-bent on buying this thing. Are you going to put them in financial trouble? So these are questions one has to ask oneself. Now, I totally understand why someone in this day and age might want to partner with somebody because of the prices of property. When I bought my first home, at that point, interest rates were pretty reasonable. Well, not reasonable compared to now. My first home I purchased in 1996. Interest rates at that point were 7.25 points.
Ooh.
Today it's 1.75. But what has happened? The entry point of that same property is not the same. So you might enter into a property at 500,000 at 1.75%. The point is you have to come up with that down payment. When we bought homes, when I started, you were looking at the low 200s, 7.25 points. It was much. I didn't even think of it as much. I just took it as normal. Now, if 3% is considered high interest.
Yes, very high interest. Okay, good to know. Another question that we had was, what risk is involved in purchasing an investment home as a first-time home buyer?
I think in order to purchase any home, there has to be proof that you can qualify to carry the home, right? So what is the risk? The risk is, what if you can't pay the mortgage? As long as you can pay the mortgage, I really don't see the risk, because if you can pay the mortgage, the worst case scenario is you don't have a tenant. Now, that's just the the direct financial impact. The other parts of it is, at this point now you become responsible for ensuring that any issues become your issues. So, because a tenant will always pick up the phone and call the landlord. There's this assumption that the landlord has deep pockets, but that's basically what it is. You could be buying a property that has known problems or unknown problems, hidden issues. So in anything we do, there's a risk, right?
And it is an investment, and with any investment, there's always risk. We
Absolutely.
always say that on this channel. But other than the mortgage, are there any other costs that you should be aware of when you purchase a property? I think a lot of people say, oh, I have the money for the down payment, I can pay the mortgage, but that's all they think about.
Yeah.
So
with any purchase of a house, in Ontario, you can purchase a house with 5% down as long as you're a citizen or permanent resident. Now, 5% down, I'm not going to advise anyone that that's the best way to buy property. If you can, ideally, you want to get in with 20%, because with 20% down, you save on the insurance, the mortgage insurance. You save that aspect. But with the rate at which property prices are increasing today, it might make sense to dip in at that 5% and take your chances. But besides the down payment, you also need to put aside 2%, at least 2% of the purchase price of the house, which covers your closing costs. Now, I'm not going to get into what the closing costs entail, but if you have that 2% in hand on top of whatever you have as your percentage to buy the house, it kind of gives you, a good starting point.
Yeah, and then even when once you're done the closing and you've purchased the house, there, I guess, costs like the property tax should be something, maintenance of the house. Like there are other things that you need to consider before you buy the house.
Yes.
It's not just that the stuff before closing, it's a lot after.
Furnishing,
closing.
appliances.
Oh, furnishing. I'm glad I didn't have to furnish.
Things that could break. You could buy a house and a week later the fridge dies on you. You have to buy another fridge. So these are those unforeseen expenses.
How can we ensure that we win at purchase when buying our first investment property?
Again, this question talks about the benefits of using a realtor. And I'm going to talk about my 4M side of my business, the commercial side of my business. Whenever an investment property is listed, there's something that's called the financials. Now, the financials basically is a total picture of what it costs to run that property. Okay? It will include the rents charged. It would include the utilities charged to the landlord. It will include what you're paying in property management. It would include what you're paying in property tax. It can include what you pay in security of the property. Now, all these numbers make up something called the financials. Now, just because a realtor who's listing the property produces the financials doesn't mean you have to take it verbatim. With my group, what we do is we take those numbers and then we redo them. There's projected numbers, there's actuals as well as projected. We take these numbers and break it out. Out of that, there's something called a cap rate. Every region in Ontario has a different cap rate. Now, when we flesh out the numbers, does it really match? Is it in line with what the cap rate is in that region? Cap rate is not just the one part of it, but when you add all these things together, this is how you decide, is this property worth my while? It's a lot more than just looking at this thing and saying, I want to own a 6-plex or an 8-plex.
Yeah.
You don't want to own something where it's costing you money.
Every month, yeah.
Now, that being said, doesn't mean you shouldn't buy something that has, we call it low-hanging fruit. And it takes that expertise to be able to see, okay, what is considered low-hanging fruit? I'm not going to delve into it in this video, but there's certain things that you can very quickly turn around in a building to turn it from going from negative into a positive. Again, the expertise, the objectivity of a realtor who's seasoned at this is what comes into play at this point.
Okay, lots to know because I think a lot of people don't do the research, or if they try to buy their house themselves, they wouldn't have access to all of this knowledge that a realtor has. So guys, as I said many times before, please use a realtor. Obviously use a reputable realtor. And we did a video earlier, as I said before, where you can learn how to find a good realtor. So
I'll just add something to that. One of the reasons why I enjoy the commercial side of my business is because we have 4 sets of eyes looking at any transaction. And now we come from different backgrounds. Each of us brings something different to the table. It's very hard to look at something 360 degrees and miss things. And even if we did miss something in one transaction, we're certainly going to make sure we don't fall prey to that in the next transaction. So when you're looking to buy a multifamily property, you definitely need that seasoned experience behind you.
Okay, so this is my favorite question that I'm going to ask you today, but what are some of the current market trends that we should be aware of? So I know the market's going a little wild right now, but what are some that we should be aware of that maybe we can jump on?
There are quite a few of these trends that I'm going to touch on. As you know, right now across Ontario, it's multiple offers everywhere. There was a time this was kept to the big cities. Not anymore. I do a lot of travel out into Simcoe County, Orillia, Barrie, Windsor, you name it. It's multiple offers. And in the past, it used to be on single family properties, residential properties. But we now have bidding wars on $1.5 million buildings, $2 million buildings.
Really?
People are bidding on these properties and they're bidding sometimes $800,000. over the list price.
Oh my gosh.
And in many cases, they're coming in with very minimal conditions. So that's one of the big trends that we have to be aware of. The second part is distance used to be an issue before COVID came along. Now, we've realized you don't necessarily have to go into an office anymore. Productivity hasn't reduced. People work from home now. So what used to tether people to the cities no longer does. So people are going outside the major cities, which is why these bidding wars are quite intense outside the major centers.
Are there still bidding wars in the major cities? So in Toronto, are there still bidding wars?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. But also way outside. How far outside? Like 2 hours outside?
Anywhere you go.
Really?
I started this year. I had to work with one of my clients who lives in London, was trying to buy an investment property in London. He couldn't afford it. So we went out to Sarnia, and we were thinking it's going to be quieter here. Oh no.
Oh really?
It was crazy in Sarnia as well.
That's not good.
You know.
So how are we going to afford to buy, like other people, how are we going to afford to buy houses if people are bidding so much over asking?
Well, the thing about it is now you have to, what I'm finding is, again, if you look at, I mentioned the book Think and Grow Rich. Again, if you allow yourself to think about the situation long enough and you surround yourself with the right kind of people, you start to understand the power of cooperation. It's like corporate prayer, right? You work with people. And so what I'll advise a lot of young people to do, if you find people you work well with, why not just pool your resources together and start buying properties as a combine? Maybe if 4 of you decide this year we're going to do one, the next year we're going to do one, but everybody's coming up with their 25% to make this thing happen. Eventually, you're going to get to the number where everybody has access to one. If you then decide to switch the ownership at that point, then by all means do that. But the point is, when we were buying homes, when we were much younger, it was very affordable to do. Now, I'm not saying it was cheap to run it, but it was affordable to get onto.
Yeah.
For you guys now, it's not easy to buy, but once you buy, it's affordable to keep it because the interest rates are quite low. Condominiums built downtown Toronto used to be very expensive. What we found out was a lot of them were used for Airbnb purposes. Now with COVID, that has cut that short. So a lot of people are dumping these properties, or at least if they can't rent them, they're trying to sell them. Now, has it severely depressed that market? No, but there's definitely a marked drop in those prices. Another thing is there are a lot of cash buyers now.
Oh no.
Yes, what we're finding is a lot of people are coming into an inheritance. So somebody who has $500,000 in cash will think nothing of overbidding on a property, because if the property costs $800,000 and he already has $500,000, why not? So cash buyers are very big.
Wow. And
a lot of those cash buyers are coming out of combines where people are tying themselves together and going ahead and doing. We see a lot of that in the multifamily end of the market. And a lot of that cash, like I said, comes from inheritance in many cases. So I think those are some of the trends that I've noticed.
Those are interesting trends. They don't make me hopeful about investing. But yes, I know that the best time to get into markets is always now, because I see even my house, a house on this just sold for $200,000 more than I paid for it. That was just a year and a half ago, right? So
yeah, you definitely bought at the right time.
Yes,
you took advantage of everything that you had, and I'm glad that it worked out that way for you.
Perfect timing. Another question that we have is, what are some of the best locations in Ontario to be looking at right now?
As I mentioned earlier, I do a lot of driving, and so I'll give you, for example, if I had to go to Barrie from Kitchener-Waterloo, because I live in the north end of Waterloo, I usually would drive through the back roads. I would go through the village of Conestoga, maybe go through Arthur, Grand Valley, Shelburne, cut through those back roads to get to Barrie. I usually would end up in Alliston, for instance, and then go up that way. what I've found is, as you're driving through these places, you usually would see signs. And a lot of the times, it depends on if you're slowing down, you happen to look left or look right, and you see a bunch of roof lines in the distance. And then all of a sudden you realize they're building new homes in this area. Now with COVID-19, it has shown us that no one is really tethered to the big cities anymore. So I always explain to people, try and look around the big city. But if you see a direct path, a straight road for 10, 15 kilometers, maybe follow it, because you never know what you might run into. That's where those gems are. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean there are no bidding wars in those places, but they're not as intense as what you'd find in the major centers like London, Toronto, Kitchener-Waterloo, Windsor, for instance. So just try and go off that beaten path, go a straight line like 15 kilometers or 10 kilometers, and you'll find gems in those places.
Perfect. And would those be good for, I know those are areas we could consider living in if it's my primary residence, but would you also say if I'm looking at it as an investment property, those would be good places to purchase?
Okay. From the statistics that we found out and from what we know in the news, I believe Canada is going to take in about 1.2 to 1.8 million people over the next 3 years. A significant number of these people are skilled people. They're not necessarily going to work in factories, or they're coming with very high level skills. They're very familiar with working with Zoom. They're very familiar with working remotely. So they're not necessarily going to live in the big cities. A family of 4, for instance, they probably just want to live in a nice place. Initially, they're going to start with a rental. So why not? If the place is habitable, it's clean, it's got amenities, because the technology is so uniform across the province now that it really doesn't matter where you live. So would I buy an investment property out in the sticks? Absolutely, yes.
Good to know. Even when I was buying in London, I was kind of like, who lives in London like that?
Yeah, I remember you were quite skeptical at that time, but
yes,
but look at what happened.
It paid off. It definitely paid off. Last question that we're going to answer today is, what factors should you look at when deciding on a location?
I guess that boils down to lifestyle. What is it that you're looking for? I'm an outdoors person. I like proximity to the countryside. So where I live, I'm 5 minutes ride from the country. So I like that. Somebody might like being in a city. It's probably what moves them. So it has to suit you. Is it an investment? Is it somewhere you want to live? Those are the factors that I'll take into account. Where I live, we have 2 universities and a college. I started out at a technology park there. That's what took me there. But then I found out that it was a good place to raise a family. So I stayed. It worked out well for me. So it all depends on what it is you're looking for out of a property.
And if anyone has further questions or they're looking to purchase their house, are they able to reach you?
Absolutely.
Perfect. And the best place to reach you would be your website, and your details are there?
Actually, by all means, put my phone number out there too.
So I just want to say thank you for coming on my channel. I hope that everyone enjoyed this video, and I hope that you learned a lot. If you have other questions, obviously reach out to Tunde directly, or ask them below, and I'll make sure they are answered. So if you have other video ideas that you want to see from me, also please leave them down below, and I will make sure I do those videos for you.
Reni, thank you very much for having me here. The honor was all mine.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Bye.